Hello, my Substack readers. I just want to say a few things about some of the stuff that I've been posting of late around Afrofuturism, Afropessimism, about the dire diary of Delia, allegory, the Second Universal Declaration of Human Rights, allegory, and some of the other stuff I've been posting about lately. That relates more to the stuff I'm doing around American narcissism, American racism, and not only understanding the past of how we got to where we are in 2023, and over the course of the last 400 years of colonial American, U.S., and even Western history, really, but also where we're going. And I just want to say this because this is the comment I get the most from those who've actually read my materials around this sort of stuff. Why are you so pessimistic? Why do you think the country is headed to where it's headed? Because of where we are and where we've been, quite frankly. If you if your assumption is that systemic racism is endemic, is bedrock, is encoded in the DNA of the United States, and that there's a collective narcissism that stems out of that racism, and that racism is also reinforced by the very narcissism that comes out of that systemic collective sense of racism and narcissism simultaneously, right? Then what is the future? That this continues in light of pandemic, climate change, um, forces on the far right, and domestic terrorism that goes with it. All of those sorts of things that are happening in our recent past and present. All of those things are the ones that we're somehow just going to overcome. I believe in God. I believe in the universe. I believe that through faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, and you can find a way through universal agape kind of love kind of things. But I also can look at the folly of man and go that, well, that might all happen, but we're not going to just get out of this unscathed, right? Climate change has been happening. We've been seeing it happening for over a quarter century, probably close to 30 years, right? You know, these forces on the far right have been moving further and further toward fascism, and actually are fascist pretty much over the last 50 years. That doesn't just change overnight. So, hence some of the things I'm writing. I think I'm being realistic. I don't think I'm not being pessimistic at all. I'm not predicting the Handmaiden's Tale, or the Handmaid's Tale, whatever that show's called. I'm not predicting a total complete collapse of human civilization across the board to the point where everybody's dead and we're just you're hitting the restart button. But I am predicting collapse in the West, right? My students, when I talk about this at the end of a U.S. history and African American history, and even a world history class where I've gotten to the 21st century, my students have this tendency to be sort of like, well, don't you think there's a way out? Don't you think there's, that we're going to innovate our way to the other side of this and these kinds of things? And I'm like, well, we could. Lots of things could happen. Maybe some alien race, with advancements in technology could clean up our atmosphere and somehow, you know, de and de and disencode racism out of the very fabric of American and Western societies and civilization. Fine, sure, why not? Death rays in Mars could commit a murder, I suppose, too. I've got a Brooklyn Bridge to sell you. It's possible. Anything's possible, but I'm talking about what's plausible, right? And so, what is plausible is the fact that if you have a more inclusive U.S., a U.S. that's majority black and brown, a U.S. that actually tries to deal with issues like systemic racism and transphobia, that tries to deal with in sort of restorative justice kinds of reparation sorts of ways. That if enough of that were to happen, that folks who are already committing acts of domestic terrorism now would gather in larger numbers and probably commit bigger and bigger acts until they implode the country, right? As I've written in other places in other cases, and in fact, in one of the Substack pieces I posted at the beginning of this on the next Black Exodus, I said, I have one of the characters essentially saying that they will destroy this country before they hand it over to us, right? And that doesn't mean they're literally handing over the country to black and brown people. It just means that including us as central figures in the development, the current and future development of this society, to be one that is anti-racist, to be one that is embracing of those who are queer, who are transgender, who are embracing of women's rights among other things, and understanding the interconnectivity between race, class, gender fluidity, and gender identity, and religion, and so many other things, that these folks will destroy the country first before they allow that to happen. They would cut their nose off to spite their face. Heck, they wouldn't cut their nose off to spite their face. They'd give themselves a lobotomy and to spite their bodies and their minds in order to make sure that that didn't happen. And that's all I'm really trying to say, right? There's much more to these stories than that, but that's the main thing. And so, so it's not about being pessimistic. It's about recognizing that fact. Folks fight tooth and nail. White folks fight tooth and nail over basic things like, hey, you think over the years, like black people, white people drinking at the same water fountain or going to the same school. And you think that, something more radical, more transformative wouldn't incite violence to the point where they would nuke their own cities? Sure they would. Of course they would. Those on the far right would pretty much do anything in order to make sure that this remains a white man's country, a heterosexual, rich at the expense of others, falling into poverty, white man's country. So